Welcome to episode number 59 of the Beyond Social Media show. I am your host, David Erickson. I'm solo today. BL will be back next week. You can find me at D.Erickson on Twitter and on my eStrategy blog at e-strategyblog.com. And, of course, you can find the show at beyondsocialmediashow.com. As you know, our format, we've got worst cases of online communications of social media, marketing, advertising. We've got the best cases of PR, advertising, marketing, social media. We wrap it up with some shiny new objects and some stats that you'll want to know. And so, of course, we start out with the worst. And we had an amazingly, breathtakingly bad example of customer service or lack thereof online with a hotel in Hudson, New York that charges newlyweds, or did at least, charge newlyweds $500 for each negative online review. So this was, again, Hudson, New York. The Union Street Guest House is the name of the inn. And they charge newlyweds $500 for each and every negative review posted on any site by any member of their wedding party. They have terms of service, or they had terms of service on their site that read thusly: if your guests are looking for a Marriott-type hotel, they may not like it here. Therefore, if you have booked the inn for a wedding or any other type of event anywhere in the region and given us a deposit of any kind for guests to stay at USGH, there will be a $500 fine that will be deducted from your deposit for every negative review of USGH placed on any internet site by anyone in your party and or attending your wedding or event. The hotel was actually threatening people who posted negative reviews. One such experience is on Yelp, and a reviewer wrote, the management, I gave them a one-star review, of course, the management of this hotel had the gall to email us twice to threaten us financially about the negative review. Here's an excerpt from their first email. Please note that your recent online review of our inn will cost the wedding party that left us a deposit of $500. This money will be charged via the deposit they have left us unless/until it is removed. Any other future reviews will also be charged to the wedding party, bride and groom, from the guarantee that they have provided us, end quote. The hotel took the language off their site only after the New York Post, page 6, ran a story on their terms of service and charging people $500 for every negative review. Only after they earned a 2-star earned, emphasis on earned, a 2-star rating on Yelp. So let this serve as a cautionary tale. If you want to ensure that your online ratings tank and you get bad press, pull this stunt. Otherwise, deal with people, well, resolve any issues, customer service issues you may have, and wow, it's just pretty amazing that somebody did that. But there you go, the worst episode of online communications this week. McDonald suffered a social backlash over an Instagram campaign. This goes under worse, sort of. So they're running Instagram ads in which people are sort of responding to negatively. Obviously, they're photographic ads on Instagram. One ad shows a hand holding a bacon cheeseburger out of the window, and the photo is shot through the car's side mirror. The caption reads, "Objects in mirror appear closer than they are. Hashtag Bacon Clubhouse." That's not a very clever caption, but there you go. The photos are actually pretty good photos, but they're getting negative comments, and it appears there's a sort of underwhelming engagement for the campaign as a whole. Several factors at work in this, I think. People aren't used to seeing ads on Instagram, so this is new to them, and you've seen this in other channels before where ads are introduced. People tend to react negatively as a whole. Just because they're not used to having ads in that channel. These ads don't appear to be targeted well enough, so many of the comments were of the "I do not like McDonald's" variety. I'd probably react the same way. I'm not a big fan of McDonald's, but I'm sure there's plenty of Mickey D fans, on Instagram. So if you can figure out who they are, if you have the right targeting tools, you can figure out who they are, and the ads would be more relevant to those people than people like me that don't go to McDonald's and don't particularly like McDonald's. Lastly, foodies are all over Instagram, right? They're posting photos, and the photos that they post of food are beautiful. They're beautiful photos. The food is beautiful. The food is usually a very high quality food, so by definition, McDonald's food photography is going to pale by comparison. So there's a lot of things that are sort of conspiring to make this less than an optimal campaign for McDonald's. But kudos to them for being sort of on the leading edge and doing this and taking the chance at a new factor, especially when it's fairly predictable that people are going to respond negatively to ads when there have been none there before, right? So lastly, I've got an example that I experienced personally last week from Panera Bread. And so I was on Nicollet Mall in Minneapolis at a Panera Bread having lunch and took a picture of my my lunch, as I do, and posted it on Instagram. And my Instagram posts go automatically to Twitter as well. So Panera was listening. They immediately responded to that post on Twitter with a request to use it. And the tweet that they had included a bit.ly link with the terms and conditions in the tweet. And then they said respond with hashtag PaneraYes if you agree to let us use this your photo in their social campaigns. So I did, reflexively responded with PaneraYes as a hashtag, and only after did I read the terms of service, which they call a social release, and they basically gives Panera Bread all rights and to use the photo in perpetuity. I didn't read that they own it. I just read that they can use it wherever they want, whenever they want, however they want, without contacting me further. So depending on your point of view, I guess it's good or bad. You know, they offered it to me, and I said yes, and I didn't read it, so that's on me. But I don't think I'm alone either. I checked the bit.ly link, and only 84 clicks since the link was created June 17 of this year. So I imagine they probably responded to more than 84 photos, given how many Panera Breads there are in the world. So I suspect, you know, nothing new. People don't read terms of service. So there you go. Those are the worst of the week. Let's go on to the best. This is awesome. This is a fantastic little campaign of rescuing dogs. So there's a rescue campaign, put 10 abandoned dogs on Tinder, on the dating mobile app Tinder. BBH agency interns posted 10 photos of abandoned dogs on the Tinder dating app. The dogs came from Social Tees Animal Rescue Shelter in New York. And, you know, when you think about it, it really makes a lot of sense, right? One intern said, people go to Tinder to find love, relationships, and companionship. This is from an Adweek article, by the way. So, you know, how can you go wrong with the unconditional love that a dog can give you, right? The intern said they got 2,700 matches in less than a week from those photos on Tinder. So a very clever way of using an app that nobody else was using it for, but is in keeping with the theme of how people use the app, right? So that's why it was successful, I think. Another in best, and you can put this in worst depending on your point of view too. John Oliver in his HBO show last week went after native advertising. Went after BuzzFeed in a rant that was, you know, his rants are about 10 to 15 minutes depending. So this is about 10 minutes long. Went after BuzzFeed. Who, of course, gets 100% of the revenue from sponsored content. Went after Time Inc., who is building, Time is building a native advertising unit, and oddly sort of used Netflix example that we covered in the show previously for Orange is the New Black, their content marketing efforts at New York Times. He wasn't that critical of it, mentioned it, had a light touch with Netflix, but I think it is because Netflix did such a good job in their content marketing. It was actually valuable content, right? It was interesting content around the theme of women in prison, which is the theme of Orange is the New Black. But the whole rant that Oliver had brings up an important point about native advertising. Again, I also saw this week that New York Times is sort of de-emphasizing their sponsored labels on their native advertising ads. Native advertising, I've said it before, is a stupid phrase. It describes absolutely nothing. It doesn't make any sense. Sponsored content is an understandable phrase. It's something that consumers can understand. And, you know, people don't have a problem getting their information directly from companies or from brands as long as that information is reliable, it's trustworthy, it's helpful, and it's not trying to trick consumers. And what native advertising is doing is more often than not trying to trick consumers into thinking it's content when it's actually paid for. It needs to be labeled as advertising. It needs to be labeled as sponsored. But more importantly, the content itself has to be compelling. It has to be valuable. It has to be more than just advertising, and that's where it's going wrong, I think. I mean, the advertising industry has been for years doing the sort of sleight of hand type of thing. They need to stop because it doesn't work anymore. Consumers are much more savvy about their media, and they understand when there's trickery. The other problem is media organizations struggling for a new economic model. So they are destroying the boundary between church and state. And again, I think that I think content marketing is fine as long as it is valuable, as long as it is trustworthy, as long as it delivers value to the customer, as long as the customer knows exactly what they're getting. So there you go. That's my take on that. Those were the best for this week. Before we go on to shiny new objects, though, I want to introduce a new segment that BL and I have talked about, a project segment. And this will be a new and occasional segment that we'll have where BL and I will discuss projects either that either of us are working on or that we want to promote or that we think are cool or both. And so this doesn't necessarily fit into best or worst, but it's projects that we want to talk about. We've kind of done this off and on without devoting a formal segment to it, but now we've decided to sort of formalize it. It won't be every week. We will do it as we need to. For now, we're just calling it the project segment, but if you've got some ideas for a catchy name, please do leave them in the comments and let us know. We're open to suggestions, definitely. But during the next few months, we're probably going to use this primarily to talk about our progress in getting the show on iTunes. So we are in the process of figuring out how to get the show on iTunes and Stitcher. So without further ado, I will go into the new segment on projects. So this is how we're going about putting the show on as an audio podcast. We record it, as you know, as a Google Hangout on air. When you do that, it records directly to your YouTube account, and from there, after the fact, after you've recorded it, you can download the MP4 video file from your YouTube account. So what I've been doing is taking the shows and downloading the MP4 file and importing them directly into the open source Audacity audio editing software. When you import video files into Audacity, it strips out the video and leaves the audio, right? Because it's audio editing software. So I recorded a standard intro and outro. We've got some great music for the intro and outro. So I slap those intros and outros on the end of the segments and then edit the transitions so that they're smooth transitions from the intros into the show and from the show into the outro. Anyway, you figure that out, get that all nice and smooth, and then export it as an MP3 file. So you need to have several episodes hosted before you submit your feed to iTunes, so iTunes won't accept an empty feed, obviously. So what I'm doing is converting past episodes. Those are my next steps, is continue to convert past episodes into the audio format. We want the appearance of having many episodes before we submit the feed to iTunes, so that when people come to it in iTunes, they actually see a backlog of episodes and see that we've been at it for a while. That gives credibility. Another next step I need to do is create cover art for the shows in iTunes. So iTunes specs for the cover art are 1400 by 1400 pixels. wide square image, so we need to figure that out and create the cover art. And then another next step is creating a style guide for us to use for the audio podcast episodes to optimize the MP3 files. So what metadata are we going to use for search visibility? What keywords are we going to use? What the title format is going to be? Standard descriptions that we'll use. Again, the keywords that we're going to use. And any calls to action we'll have in the descriptions of the actual episodes. And then, so iTunes is sort of the default go-to directory for podcasts. When people want to find podcasts, more likely than not, they're going to be going to iTunes to find them. So we need to be on iTunes. I have mentioned Stitcher as well. I use the Stitcher app for listening to iTunes on my phone and on my iPad. And it is pretty popular, but what about any others? So I got a question for y'all listeners. What do you use? Where do you go to find podcasts, audio podcasts in particular? Are there any other tools you use for listening to podcasts? Do you use Stitcher? Do you use iTunes? Do you use both? And also, if you have any experience with it, do you have any tips or advice for us as we go through this process of getting the show as an audio-only podcast and getting up on iTunes and Stitcher and promoting and so forth. So, love to hear any experiences that you've had with it. Please let us know in the comments. And then on with the rest of the show. Shiny new objects this week. Datamonkey. So this is a learning tool. It is basically courses for learning how to analyze data using spreadsheets or SQL language, structured query language, with monkey humor thrown in as well. So with a dry subject such as data analysis in Excel and SQL, having a little humor goes a long way, and they do it. So it's datamonkey.pro. This is one of the new top-level domain extensions. So datamonkey.pro is where you can find that. And then secondly, Scrollbox. Scrollbox is a blog app that unveils an email subscribe box once a user scrolls to the bottom of the article. You've seen these sort of fly-in things on sites all over the place. So this is a nice little app that you can add to your blog to get new email subscribers. It hooks in with MailChimp, Constant Contact, and some other email marketing providers. You can find that at SumoMe, SumoMe.com/app/scroll-box, and we'll have the links on the blog post, which is live right now. Actually, you can go to the blog post at BeyondSocialMediaShow.com/59 and get all these links as well right now. Finally, let me wrap it up with the daily numbers. The effect of trust and relevance on email marketing success. This is from a Silver Pop survey of nearly 4,000 consumers in the US, UK, and Germany. And top-line statistics from the survey, 71% of respondents would be more likely to make a purchase if an email was tailored to their likes and preferences. So knowing who your customers are and delivering them relevant content is important. Can't say it enough. 58% would not open an email if they thought it irrelevant to them or their needs. Again, relevance, 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 right? 40% of respondents would not open an email if the subject line was not relevant to them. So that's their first, indication of whether or not they're going to open an email is what is in the email. So that's the purposes of a subject line, to get people to open the email. 64%, including 70% in the US, would open an email simply because they trusted the brand. Okay, so that's the trusted sender thing. So the email address from which the email is coming is an important way of building trust. So if they know who's sending it, they're going to be far more likely to open the email than if they don't know who's sending it. So you got to build brand awareness. You got to build trust in that brand. 17%, including 21% in the U.S., tend to buy directly from a brand email once a month. So once you establish that trust, once you establish that credibility, once you're delivering relevant content, you're going to be more likely to have repeat customers from that email correspondence. 1/3 would not open emails from brands if they receive too much correspondence from them. So you got to figure out the frequency too, and that really mileage will vary. That depends on your audience, and you're going to have to figure that out. And what you're sending, and whether it's relevant, and whether it's too much or not. And you can look at benchmarks, but it will depend on your audience. 3/4 said that a brand's email approach has stopped them from buying from the brand. So, right again, you need to know your audience and know what's too much, what's not enough, know what's relevant to them. Relevance, 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 and trust. If you're delivering relevant content to them, you're going to build trust. And so I can't say it enough. These are fundamentals of blocking and tackling, but it's surprising how often people don't adhere to this stuff. So again, the show notes and link are at the blog right now, live at BeyondSocialMediaShow.com/59. You'll find all the links there. And BL will be back next week. So until next week, thanks for watching. You can find me, David Erickson, at DErickson on Twitter, e-strategyblog.com. You can find the show at BeyondSocialMediaShow.com. Thanks for listening, or watching, or eventually listening when we get on iTunes. Anyway, thanks.